Welcome back. We've talked about different things. We talked about the Nigerian tax system. We talked about locally made products and how we can get them to international standards and expanding the manufacturing industry. But right now, we're going to be talking data management and the economy. If you go to upwardly mobile circles of young Nigerians, basically what you hear, they talk about data of Nigerians, the data bank in the database in Nigeria is not what it's supposed to be or is not being used as it should be, especially in the areas of planning. But the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics is there, and a lot of people believe, or is believed to be the custodian of the database in Nigeria. How effective has these data been used for the different things that it needs to be do? Or is it possible that the absence of uniform data is affecting data management and the economy negatively? Well, these are all questions that we're hoping will get answered today. We have the Statistician General of Nigeria, who's also the Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics, Mr. Yemi Kale. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to know you're there. Now, let's hit the nail smack on the head. There are a lot of people who would argue when they say there's adequate database in Nigeria. Would you agree with that?
Can you take that again? I didn't actually hear the question.
Okay. A lot of people believe that the biggest challenge of Nigeria is an adequate database. Do you agree with that?
Well, I wouldn't say that that's the biggest challenge of Nigeria. I think Nigeria has other challenges, but I would say that yes, the importance of data cannot be understated. Data is extremely important in planning, in virtually almost every area of our life, in terms of policy, in terms of monitoring and evaluation. We need accurate data. I would say that the investment that needs to be made in data collection, it can be better as far as government is concerned. And I would also say that there's been a big change and improvement in the way data has been collected over the last few years. But yes, we still have to go.
Okay, now you talked about data that has been collected. Now, different agencies of government, different organizations collect data at different levels and they're used for different things. The telecom companies have the data they've collected. The National Identity Commission has its own data. Road safety has its own data. Police has its own data. How is it that we can't seem to get uniform data, especially as we go towards diversifying the economy?
Well, the Nigerian statistical system operates with the National Strategy for Development of Statistics, and that specifies how the entire data system is meant to be coordinated. Now, at the apex of that system is the National Bureau of Statistics, and ministries, department, agencies that collect data are meant to collect their data in line with the prescriptions of the National Bureau of Statistics, with the procedures and the processes established. We've done all that. We've established these templates and so on that are meant to be used for collecting data. And with respect to administrative data, and I'm not talking of surveys and censuses now, once the data is collected in line with the procedures that have been set by the MBS, these MDAs are meant to send them either electronically or otherwise to National Bureau of Statistics to be uploaded into their database. Now, the challenge we have is that sometimes these ministries, department, agencies, some of them, in contravening the statistics law, would either refuse to send this data or would have challenges sending data, or are not fully equipped with required staff to actually collect this data in the procedure and the manner in which the MBS has prescribed. And that's part of the challenges that we are facing at the MBS, and we have been trying to resolve over the last few years. I have to also state that MBS was actually only set up with the Enabling Act in 2007. So the MBS, as you know it, has only been in operation since 2007. And you're trying now to rebuild a statistical system that has been that virtually almost collapsed since the days of the old Federal Office of Statistics.
How quickly then can we get uniform data across board? If you were quoted as saying that it is not the methodology or the data production process, but the wrong selection of indicators to define the problem and monitor its progress. So how quickly can we get these errors corrected so that we can have uniform data, not just across board?
Well, I think it's a combination of several problems, but I'll focus on the wrong selection of indicators. Now, when you have, I think when I took over the MBS about 4 years ago, you had a situation where 95% of data funding was coming from development agencies, was external. Now, whoever provides the funding is going to an extent, determine the methodology. They will determine the procedures. They also determine the frequency of data being collected. Now, if a developer agency is interested in a particular indicator because they have some projects in that area, they're going to come in and they're going to focus on collecting that data, and the energies will be devoted to that indicator. But because government was not funding statistics properly, it has improved since then, but it's still a huge shortfall. You cannot. It's difficult to dictate to the funder of the data what you should produce. Now, if the control was in the statistics office, where we can dictate what we produce because we have been funded by government, it makes a lot of this easier. So in such a situation, such developer agencies, based on what they are looking at, are going to determine the indicators that they want to collect. The problem with this system is that they are only collected for a particular period because they are trying to focus on a particular project, whatever project they are working on currently. And as soon as that project is over, you have a situation where there's a gap in the series, and again, until they come back in 2-3 years and they want to collect and updated data, then you're going to get. So if you have a situation where your funding for data is external to the system, you're going to have a situation where the selection of indicator and probably the methodology might be different and might be designed to suit the needs of that funder of data. So I think the solution is to empower the statistical offices at the MBS and at the state statistical offices so that they can select data that is required to inform policy based on the priorities of government, based on what is being monitored and evaluated, based on what citizens want to evaluate their government about. And that is what we are, again, trying to change by increasing advocacy for data to our government to ensure to put more pressure on the funders where we gain control of the selection of indicators and the procedures and methodologies. And that's exactly what we have been focusing on.
But there are those who have really criticized Nigeria's data system. What answers would you have for them if you're talking about issues with funding and all of that?
Well, I always say that I'm not going to stay here and say that everything is fantastic in Nigeria's statistical system. I think the challenges, I think 90% of the challenges of the Nigeria statistical system is inadequate funding. I think that with regards to what we are giving money to produce, we produce the data regularly, and the quality of such data is accurate. But the problem really is not the quality of the data that is produced. I think it's more in terms of the quantity of data available, and the quantity of that data depends on the amount of money that is thrown at it. We have situations because data, things like data and research are not things that Nigeria can feel and touch. During the budgeting process, policymakers are a bit uncomfortable throwing a lot of money to data, despite the fact that it's important, because they feel, and I understand, that Nigerians want to see buildings, we want to see roads, but things like data, like research, that are not really things that people can see or feel, but are extremely important in the entire process. Once you have a cash crunch, you tend to cut down the budget of things like data and research that are not exactly felt directly by the Nigerian public. So that's actually what the problem is. If adequate funding is made to the Nigerian statistical system, it will be significant. We have South Africa, for example, whose data budget is 20 times more than what we have in Nigeria. I don't even want to start with the US and countries like the US and Canada in terms of their data. But there's a direct relationship between countries that take their data seriously as well as the development of their country. And I think that's what we should be focusing on in Nigeria as well.
Taking the data would it be right then to say that politics has affects data management in Nigeria negatively?
Oh yes, over the years, politics. There was a time when MBS was still the Federal Office of Statistics. As you know, Nigeria went through a long period of military rule. Now, military rule, they don't pay attention to data. They're not really paying attention to planning and such things. So in the process, the statistical system was significantly affected and depreciated. So what we have been trying to do since the return to democracy, since 2007, in any case, for the NBA, is to restore that importance that data has. And it's a gradual process. It's going to take some time before people understand how important data is. The truth is, and I say this repeatedly, you cannot solve any problem in Nigeria without knowing what the facts are. And the facts are data. You do not solve unemployment by just picking a random figure of jobs you want to create in a year. You have to understand the number of people that are unemployed.
If I may come in here,
you have to understand whether they are male or female, what their qualifications are. You have to understand how many jobs different sectors can produce in a particular year and so on. And that's what you use in deciding this is the number of jobs the economy can and should produce in a particular year. Everything revolves around understanding the numbers. I can remember having a conversation with a former finance minister where she says, we don't have enough money in the economy, so we have to cut the funding for data. And I remember telling that finance minister that, look, if you don't have money, that's why you need data. I'm the one that will tell you whether health needs more money than education, whether education needs more money than agriculture. Otherwise, you're just allocating resources based on gut feeling. The number should tell you which sectors require more funding. And that's actually, so data actually should precede all these other things rather than being the scapegoat when data would actually tell you how to better manage your scarce resources as opposed to being the scapegoat when they are scarce resources.
Mr. Kale, the matter there might not be a question of lack of money or too much money. It might be a question of harmonizing the different data that's been gathered from different governments, from different parastatals, from different organizations. How do we get our data harmonized?